Hi everyone, Angela Guanzini here with E4D University, and welcome to your Chairside chat for today. Decisions, decisions, decisions. Material selection. Which material should I use, where, when, and why? So the objectives that I'm going to be covering are selecting proper block size for the type of restoration that you're going to be milling out. I'm also going to discuss Ivoclar Vividence CAD/CAM materials as well as our other partner 3MSB. E4D's material, the acrylic burnout block that we like to call Bob, and then indications for material selection. So the material size. Why would I use a size 14 block versus a size 8 block? So you can see up at the top, it's giving you recommendations based on molars, premolars, inlays, onlays. A couple of reasons why you want to use a smaller size block. So in that mill tab, in your design software, when the mill tab comes up in the lower left-hand corner, it always gives you options. So sometimes it only has a size 14 as an option, but other times when you have smaller restorations, you may have up to 3 options saying that you could use a 10, 12, or a 14. So what I would recommend to you is using the smallest block size possible. And the 2 reasons are, 1, less mill time, and 2, less wear on your mill tools. So if you're an office that does a lot of inlays and onlays, it's highly recommended that you have some size 8s and 10s. If you're an office that does mostly full coverage crowns, working in the molars and premolars, you're probably going to have size 12 and 14s in stock. So to start things off, I'm going to preface and just kind of make sure that everybody understands when talking about materials, when I'm talking about 3M materials and talking about Ivoclar Vivident materials, if anything that I say today sparks another question or seems to be a contraindication to something that you have heard, or it's contradicting something that you have heard, what I want you to do for me is please contact the manufacturer or go on to the manufacturer's website, so to Ivoclar Vivident or 3MSB. And that's because I'm going to say this, I want you to always follow manufacturer's indications for the materials. So manufacturer recommendations, they're the ones doing all the testing. So I want to make sure that you know that that's who you're going to go to for any questions that you may have. But what I'm going to do is just share with you what Ivoclar Vivident and 3MSB has shared with me regarding materials. So Empress CAD. Where would you use Empress? Well, Empress is indicated for full coverage crowns, inlays, onlays, and interiors. Now, a lot of times, and now especially with the introduction of Emax, many people are using Emax for full coverage crowns in the posterior and not using Empress as much. But you must know manufacturer's recommendations say that full coverage crowns in Empress is an indication, and that's as long as you follow the proper preparation guidelines. So it's a highly aesthetic block. It is 40% lucite crystal, so that reinforced lucite glass. The fluxual strength, 160 megapascals. So this block comes in 3 different, not shades, but let's say opacity levels. So we've got LT, meaning low translucency, so more opaque. HT, high translucency, so more translucent. And then the multi-block. So all of our blocks are monolithic. But the Empress is our only block, that multi-block, that comes as polychromatic, meaning that it looks as though it's got varying levels of shades. So the very bottom of the block looks more opaque, whereas the top of the block looks more translucent. So that was my favorite block to use in the anterior. I thought it was absolutely gorgeous, and I didn't have to do really any characterization to it. I could simply glaze it. After I did some, primary, secondary, and tertiary anatomy, and it was gorgeous. So that was my favorite block. Why is it good to use? Why is it quick? Well, it does not have to go into the oven. So it's optional to fire it, meaning you can glaze it or you could hand polish it. Adhesively bonded, meaning that this material absolutely must be adhesively bonded in. It cannot be conventionally cemented. Emax. So Emax is indicated for pretty much anything. A lot of people are using this for a full round house. So inlays, onlays, full coverage crowns, veneers, and implant crowns. This material is very strong. 360 megapascals. So think back, Empress was 160, which is why so many more people are using Emax in the posterior. But why would you want to use Empress versus Emax in the posterior? Well, if you're not concerned about a patient's bite and the strength isn't a concern for you, they're not a grinder or a clencher, maybe you'd rather use Empress instead of Emax because Emax must be fired, meaning in its primary state, so in the purple phase, it is called lithium metasilicate. It does not reach its full strength at 360 megapascals until it has gone through the firing process. Then it becomes lithium disilicate. Then it becomes 360 megapascals. So if an office is really looking to cut down on time and to turn things over, or get the patient out of the chair a little bit faster, they may want to use Empress versus Emax as long as they can get that adequate reduction. So Emax comes in LT and HT, so that low translucency or that high translucency. The Emax is the only material that we have today that can be conventionally cemented. So manufacturer is going to recommend, however, always, that you would use a self-adhesive so that you would bond it in. Bonding is going to increase the material strength by about 10%. So manufacturer recommends bonding them in, but if you absolutely had to, this material could be conventionally cemented. Another nice thing about Emax is that Emax you can try in the mouth prior to putting it through the crystallization process. So when it comes out of the mill in its purple phase, you can still put it in the mouth, have the patient tap, tap, tap gently and get that occlusion just perfect so that once you glaze it and put it into the oven, there will be no further adjustments. Empress, however, you absolutely cannot try it in the mouth and have the patient tap, tap to check occlusion until it has been bonded in. Impulse. So Impulse CAD is also Emax. So you've got that same high strength at 360 megapascals. Its indications are for inlays, onlays, and veneers, so those whisper-thin veneers. What I want you to notice is that it does not say full coverage crown. And the reason being is because when you see the word Impulse, I want you to think enamel replacement. So it's available in value shades 1, 2, and 3. And those value blocks give it a really lifelike brightness, so beautiful for those prepless veneers. It also comes in opal shades 1 or 2. So aesthetic veneers with a minimum thickness of 0.4 millimeters. So you can see from the pictures, you know, the translucency there, which is why it's so great for those thin veneers. All right, switching partners. So now we're going to talk about 3M SB's materials. We've got the Lava Ultimate. So the new nano-resin ceramic. What does that mean? Well, what it is it's a combination of bonded zirconia and silica nanoparticles. So this material right here has become very, very popular, and the reason being is because A, it mills out extremely quick, and B, it does not need to go into the oven. So in fact, it doesn't only not need to go in the oven, it absolutely cannot go in the oven. What are its indications? Well, inlays, onlays, full coverage crowns, veneers, and implant crowns. What you're going to do is bond this material in. You are not going to do an acid etch. So the Ivoclar materials, you're always doing that hydrofluoric acid etch, the 5% hydrofluoric acid etch. 20 seconds for Emax, 60 seconds for Empress. But with the Lava Ultimate, when you're treating the interior of that restoration, you're actually going to be using, you know, your sandblasting. So you're going to be using your cojet, your 50 micron particles of that aluminum oxide. This material strength, 200 megapascals. So if you kind of think back to what we've talked about, we've got 160 with Empress, 200 with Ultimate, and 360 with Emax. This material can come right out of the milling unit, be hand polished, and seated in the mouth. It's got a beautiful chameleon effect, so it really, really blends well in with the dentin and kind of takes on that shade. It is compatible with light curable composite stains, so if you did want to add some characterization, that is an option for you. You'll notice it says backed by a 10-year limited warranty, and what that means is that if doctors follow the preparation guidelines of that 1.5 to 2 millimeters of occlusal reduction and 1 to 1.5 millimeters of reduction on the axial walls, that 3M will replace that block if the restoration breaks. So make sure that you're always taking that post-op x-ray so that you can have that proof that you've got that proper reduction if a block does indeed break. Paradigm MZ100. So MZ100 is 100% composite. What are the indications for that? Your inlays, your onlays, your crowns, and your veneers. Now, as far as the way that we used it in our practice, we used it for the inlays and onlays. And the reason being is because it just mills out so fast, and it's so nice to seat and be able to really burnish and adjust that occlusal margin after you seat it. So it was really nice when you're doing quadrant dentistry. Plus, sometimes patients really just didn't want to pay for that upcharge of maybe a porcelain inlay. So this way we could still use our E4D for it, and it would just be a direct, or pardon me, it would be an indirect composite instead of direct. Flexural strength, 150 megapascals, so just a little bit below the Empress. It's a hand polish, no firing required. In fact, absolutely no firing, otherwise it will melt. Okay, so 3M materials never, ever, ever go into the oven. This too is compatible with light curable composite stains. Easy to repair intraorally, meaning that, burnishing it at that margin, on the occlusal margin for inlays. And it's radio opaque, so really easy and nice to see on those x-rays. Now, E4D's material is called Bob. So Bob is our burnout block. It is acrylic. Why would you use this block? Well, if you look at the material, you look at the pictures, in the lower right-hand corner you can see a gold crown. So that is when you'd use this acrylic block. If you ran out of real estate, let's say the tooth number 2, you just couldn't get that 1.5 to 2 millimeters of reduction, but you still wanted to use your E4D and scan in the tooth, what you can do then is go ahead and follow the preparation guidelines. So heavy chamfer, butt joint, or shoulder margin. You're going to scan in the prep. You're going to mark your margin, design the restoration as normal using your E4D Design Center, and then you're going to send it to the mill. But instead of using a porcelain block, you're going to use the acrylic burnout block. You're going to put that in, and then when it comes out, that's the only thing that you're going to be sending to your laboratory. So your lab script and this acrylic block. And then what the laboratory is going to do is they're going to use their investment burnout casting, and they're going to literally burn out that block and then fill it with the alloy so that you can get your full alloy restoration. So it's a pretty neat thing. So the material selection chart. Now this is in your user manual. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, it says restoration across the top, and then type of material down the left-hand side. So 3M's materials, the Paradigm MZ100 and the Lava Ultimate, and then Ivoclar Vividence materials. So green meaning primary indication, yellow the secondary indication for that material, and then gray with manufacturer caution, meaning kind of a contraindication. So remember when I was talking about that CAD impulse? So the Emax CAD impulse, you'll notice where it says implant restoration, it's grayed out. And that's because, if you remember, the impulse is an enamel replacement type block, or whisper thin veneers. And I'm not going to want to have that highly translucent opalescence and value shades over a titanium abutment. It's just not going to be pretty to be able to see that gray through the block. Where the primary indications are, you can see there are quite a bit of green. So take a look at this chart and see, kind of what makes sense for you. And then always, always refer back to those recommended manufacturer's recommendations with materials as far as where to place them. I also want you to ask yourself, what's opposing? What's opposing in that patient's mouth? And maybe take that into consideration when you're picking out a material. Take a look at your schedule. What type of schedule are you running? How much time do you have? Maybe using Lava Ultimate would be beneficial as long as it's working and functional in the patient's mouth, depending on what's opposing. But, for your schedule, you maybe just didn't have time to do the Emax, and you didn't have time to do that firing. And because the patient's bite and everything's functional, you didn't have a heavy grinder, that Lava Ultimate may be a better option than if you were crunched for time. So those are the things you kind of take into consideration as far as, the decisions, where, when, and why. Think about your patient's bite, their function. Think about what's opposing that restoration. and then think about, your timing, and then as well as the indications recommended by the manufacturer. So what we covered was selecting the proper block size, meaning obviously from that mill tab, if it gives you an option between a 12 and a 14, I'm always going to use the 12 if I have it in stock because I want to save mill time and wear my mill tools. The Ivoclar Vivident materials. We discussed Empress, Emax, and Impulse. Any questions on those, please visit Ivoclar Vivident's website. 3M SB's Lava Ultimate, so the nano ceramic, and the Paradigm MZ100. Remember that 3M materials must never, ever, ever go into the oven, and that 3M materials must be sandblasted with that aluminum oxide, 50 micron particles or less. The Ivoclar Vivident materials must be hydrofluoric acid etched with 5%, and that's 20 seconds on Emax and 60 seconds on Empress. And then the E4D material, the acrylic burnout block. So when you need that gold restoration, use your E4D and send out the acrylic block. It's going to save the lab time and it's going to save you money. And then the indications for material selection. So using that guide from your user manual and taking a look at that, but also taking into consideration your schedule time, the patient's bite, and what's already opposing that new restoration. So at E4D University, we want to make sure you have access to our resources. So visit us at www.e4d.com, log in under the ECHO member registration under resources, and log in using your username and password so that you can view additional Chairside chats and as well have access to the 3C Learning Library. So make sure and scroll down on this page until you see the 3C CAD CAM CAN icon, and go ahead and click on that so that you've got access to another website full of videos and so that you can find something that may interest you. If your staff members or one of your staff members is not already registered on the ECHO forum, this is a free membership. It will grant them access to the resource page at any time. So please have them sign up at www.e4d.com/ECO so that they too can get their own personal invites to the Chairside chats. So thank you for watching. It's always a pleasure working with other CAD/CAM professionals in the dental industry. Happy scanning, and please send me future ideas for Chairside chats at education@d4dtech.com. Until next time.